Update me on the quarterback situation for Washington.
Jacoby Brissett is questionable with a hamstring. So they wanted to go from Sam Howell to Jacoby Brissett. Howell has been sacked, a ridiculous number of times. I think it's 60 times on the year for Sam Howell. He's
also throwing picks at a ridiculous clip.
Yeah, he's throwing, and really, Brissett has come off the bench the last 2 weeks and kind of rescued Sam Howell and rescued the Commanders. Well, this week it was supposed to be Jacoby Brissett, and it may still be Jacoby Brissett, but word out of Washington is that Brissett suffered a hamstring injury in practice this week and that he is 50-50 whether he's going to go. So they list him as questionable for this game. So that's big. That's absolutely big. I mean, I don't know that, I think the Niners would rather face Howell than Brissett.
No doubt.
Just because Howell holds the ball a long time. He's got a big arm. He's got mobility, but he's also he's now starting to show the effects of being sacked 60 times in a year. You start to lose confidence. You start to expect to go down. And this is going to be, it doesn't sound like for the Niners, Eric Armstead is out. Now, Brock Purdy, Deebo Samuel, Trent Williams, all are off the injury report. So Trent with the groin's going to go. Deebo's had a neck injury. He's going to go. Brock's got the stinger. He's going to go. So those guys are going to go. They're off the injury report. Armstead, though, is considered to be out with the plantar fasciitis. Juwan Jennings, they're still listing as out with a concussion. Jalen Moore, they're listing as out with a concussion. Jair Brown's got a knee sprain. John Lynch, I think, said on the radio that Jair's going to try to give it a go. So that's surprising because sprained knee, you're thinking he's out for sure 2 weeks, but he's been working out on the side. He hasn't participated in practice. Wednesday was a walkthrough. Thursday they had a practice. He didn't participate in either practice. He worked out on the side, and they're saying it's going to be a game time decision. So if he cannot go, the veteran, Logan Ryan, is going to start opposite Tayshaun Gibson at safety. And then Ross Dwelly's also out. He's got the high ankle sprain as well. As far as questionable game time decision, Aaron Banks with a turf toe. Is he going to go? Is he not going to go? If he doesn't go at left guard, Ben Barch probably steps in at left guard. Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles was questionable now because of an illness. We're at that time of the year too. Jordan Mason, they're saying, is questionable because of an illness. Ambry Thomas has got a knee and a hand injury. They also list him as questionable. We may see Danny Gray for the first time. They opened his practice window. And one kind of interesting note I saw, Dan, is that Chris Kasarik, the Niner D-line coach, says that Robert Beal Jr., the rookie from Georgia, has looked really good in practice and that he's getting off the ball in a great way. He's very fast. We're talking about a guy with, sub 4.5 speed at 250 pounds. So I don't know. We'll see if Beal can give them some juice. I mean, you got that when you have those kinds of measurables and you're running 4.4, 4.48 or whatever the heck he ran at the combine, and you're coming out your defensive end. Those guys are always nice to have. So I love the fact that I'm hearing Chris say that Beal's starting to get off the ball. When you're working on that's what that position's about, getting off the ball. Get off the ball. Don't get left in your stance. Get off the ball. Get up the field. And Beal's got big-time speed, so maybe we'll see Beal on Sunday.
The one thing, Larry, when you talk about just previewing this game and that offensive line, to me, it begins and ends there. That's a level of concern. Now, you should beat Washington because Washington just isn't very good right now.
And they're banged up, too. They'll be without Kendall Fuller's and out. Benjamin St-Juste, their two top corners. They're already 32nd rated in pass defense DVOA. So should be a game where the Niners can pass it on the Commanders.
Yeah, but Payne and Allen are still, these guys can go. I mean, Still makes no sense why they got rid of Chase Young, but that's, if we were doing a show in D.C., maybe we could take some calls. I don't really give a rip because he's obviously a huge asset for the 49ers, but their D-line is still adequate. And I think there's a huge question with the 49ers in terms of still protecting Brock Purdy, especially as you alluded to the injuries of Banks and not a healthy Trent Williams. I mean, that thing is sort of upside down when you talk about the O-line. And the one thing that Washington has been able to do, and probably the best part of their team, is that D-line, even without Chase Young.
Well, and for the 49ers, I mean, the Niners have the line that they, paid for. They're 25th in the NFL, the 49ers are, in offensive line team spending. As far as what they are, they spend the 25th most on their offensive line as any team in the NFL. So they're in the bottom portion of the league as far as what they've spent on their O-line, and they've got the best left tackle in the game. But everybody else, they're trying to do it on the cheap. And, the reality is that win, lose, or draw, whether the Niners win the Super Bowl or fall short, this offseason is going to be largely about upgrading that offensive line. McKivitz is getting worked pretty hard right now at right tackle. He's had some good games, but he's coming off a very bad game. Burford was horrible. He was like an emergency right tackle in this game against the Ravens. That's the reason that they didn't bring Brock Purdy back onto the field. It wasn't because, oh man, Brock, they love Sam Darnold, or they don't believe that Brock could lead a comeback. They knew they had Spencer Burford at right tackle, and he was getting absolutely lit up. So you're not going to put your quarter. I mean, the only thing worse than losing to the Ravens would have been losing to the Ravens and losing Brock Purdy for the year.
That was ugly. In that fourth quarter, with Trent Williams out and that offensive line just falling to pieces, that's you're right. That's when players get hurt. And look, it's not so much that you're sacking Brock Purdy, but again, you speed him up, and any quarterback becomes susceptible to mistakes. They should beat Washington, but you know how these things go. Early turnovers, especially against an underdog, and you give them a sense of confidence and you let them score first. The other thing is, Larry, any chance that after the emotional game, you know how these things work, the big game that they've been pointing to in that loss to Baltimore on Christmas Day in front of the world, is there any chance that they're overlooking or the proverbial air's out of the room and they're just not at that emotional peak to take on a team like that of Washington?
Well, I mean, it is, flying, it's a short week flying across country, but you're flying cross country against a Washington team that's bad.
Yeah.
That you should absolutely beat. So, and the Niners got to have it. I mean, if they don't win this game, they're not gonna have the 1 seed. They're not gonna have the bye. If you ask me, do the Niners need the 1 seed to win the Super Bowl? Yes, they need the bye. That's how dinged up they are. They've got to have that rest. I mean, there's no question. If they don't get that rest, I don't think they're gonna do it. Now, the big question in this game, I don't know if you saw Kyle Van Noy for the Ravens, but he went on his YouTube channel and claimed that the Ravens have basically showed the blueprint on how to beat the 49ers, and that the rest of the league just needs to copy their blueprint. And what he's talking about is he's just talking about the Ravens defense that blitzed Brock Purdy off the edges with their corners and dropped lots of people into the middle of the field and basically just said, hey, you know what? We're going to check your tendencies. We see where the spots, the windows that you typically have enjoyed throwing in the last, 4 to 6 weeks. And we're going to play zone on the back end and play guys in those windows as much as we possibly can. That's what they did. Now, I asked Brock on Wednesday or a Thursday, I asked Kyle on Wednesday, are you going to adjust? Or I guess it was the question that I asked Brock. I said, are you going to adjust to, or do you feel like you have the answers? After watching the film of what the Ravens did to you defensive wrinkle-wise, do you guys feel like you guys have the answers going forward? And he said they really liked their plan against Baltimore and that he himself, Brock, didn't execute it well enough. And that's what he was saying. But I actually kind of agree with Van Noy. I think that in this game, the Ravens did some unique things, and they put a lot of defenders in those windows where Brock likes to throw. And I think other teams, maybe starting this week with the Commanders, are going to copy it. And can the Niners adjust to that with more outbreaking routes and corner routes and sideline routes and less stuff in the middle of the field? I think it's going to be that. To me, is what I'm looking for in this game. Is how does Washington defend the Niner pass game, and do the Niners put up big passing yards, or is their pass game stymied and they turn it over like they did last week?
Well, I think we do have to remember that in the beginning of that game, in that first half, I saw George Kittle find seam routes where there wasn't anybody within 5-10 yards of him. They had success. In fact, I think they outgained statistically, offensively, the Baltimore Ravens. So this idea that they stymied him or shut him down, I think, we have to keep things in perspective, that the 49ers enjoyed a lot of success, had more big plays than that of Baltimore. To me, if you really want to offset somebody coming off the edge or trying to stop the passing game that is the 49ers, well, run the damn ball, because you've had success doing that. And just get back to sort of meat and potatoes and the success that is Christian McCaffrey and going off that left side, which sets up play action and then gets you back into, the ability to throw effectively. If you have the leverage and, have them give the guessing game is on their end where they don't know exactly what it is that you're going to do, because that's when the 49ers have that balance, right? That's when you can just sense it. You know that a defense is reeling, and then they start guessing, and then they get gashed, and you can see clearly that the hammer is in the hands of the 49ers offensively, and they can dictate exactly where they want to go and what they want to do on the field. But I think the running game, as I said immediately as I was on the air after that game, that's as big as anything, and they got away from it, in my estimation, way, way too prematurely in Baltimore.
I agree. They should have run it more at the Ravens. I mean, when you looked at those numbers and you saw, wait a second, Baltimore's dead last against teams that run out of 21 and 22 personnel, two running backs, basically, the running back and the fullback. Come on, right there, the Niners run 60% of their stuff from two backs. They were ideally suited to run it at the Ravens all day, all night on Christmas night. And instead, McCaffrey had 14 carries. J.P. Mason had none. I think Debo might have had one or two. The Niners passed the ball 46 times. This game was 16-12 at halftime. I mean, it was anybody's game. Now, it got away from them in the third quarter, but you could have stayed with the run even after the Ravens went up 30-12. There was still like 11 minutes to play in the third quarter, and you could have stayed with the run. So, to me, if there was one mistake in that game, it was that the 49ers had a major advantage in two backs against running the ball against the Ravens, and they didn't take advantage of it. They had first quarter, they had 10 passes and 5 runs. That should have been reversed. That should have been 10 runs and 5 passes. It should have been a run-heavy plan, and for whatever reason, it wasn't. So I think that would have changed things quite a bit. Now, the Niners did connect on a couple pass plays early, and maybe Kyle felt like, hey, you know what? We can throw the ball on this team. But once Hamilton picked off that first pass, I think I would have gone to a, hey, you know what? I mean, especially when you're going up against a Baltimore team that's like literally number one in like a bunch of different defensive categories, and yet they're dead last against two backs, and that's what you run, and you only run the ball sparingly. That was a mistake, in my opinion.
Do you find any credence in the 49ers when they're labeled as a front runner? Like when they get out in front, this is a team that can win? I mean, because you and I grew up with the Niners and Joe Montana and Steve Young, who, their trademark was, here comes Joe with 2 minutes on the clock and you're down 5 points or you're down a couple of touchdowns. The 49ers would just come from behind. The number that jumps out at me is that Shanahan 0-36.
It's 0-38 now.
Was it 38?
Yeah, so the Niners under Shanahan 0-38 when they trail by 8 or more points
in the fourth.
He's also 1-32 when trailing by 3 points entering the fourth quarter.
How do you explain that away, or can you?
It's a great question. I mean, how do you explain it? I don't know if I have an explanation for it. He gets a little pass happy at times. Maybe if they ran the ball a little bit more, that wouldn't be the case. I definitely feel like there were opportunities. You know, I mean, they've lost some key games in this way because they didn't have offensive balance in the fourth quarter. But yeah, I mean, and people talk about, well, Brock's got to prove he can win coming from behind. Shanahan's got to prove that they can win coming from behind. I mean, they really don't win. I mean, like that game Monday night, I didn't really get the feeling that they were going to win that game at any point in that game. That's not their script. They're even though they're a great team with tons of talent, they seemingly can only really win one way, which is they get a lead and build it up on you. I mean, the 49ers this year, when they have won games, that they win by huge margins. They dominate their opponents. They've got 8 wins this year by 16 points or more. I mean, that's a lot of blowout wins. But can they win a grimy game, as Fred Warner described? Can they win a game where they've got to come from behind in the fourth quarter? Can they win a game where it's back and forth? They don't seem to be able to win those games. Now, I'm not sure if Shanahan feels the pressure, if it's about those numbers are tied to Jimmy Garoppolo and his inability. Or to do, Jimmy needed play action, right? If you didn't have play action, the rush would get to him. Their line, I mean, their offensive line kind of needs play action. If they don't have play action at their disposal, their line just gets overrun by opposing defensive lines. Maybe that has a lot to do with it. But you're right. They have not, under Shanahan, for the most part, come back in any game that they're not leading going to the fourth.
I think the one game this year that at least resembled that was that win in Seattle. Because it was at now. They weren't trailing in the fourth quarter, but early on in that game,
Seattle made a nice run in that third quarter, though.
Yeah, but if you remember that, I think the 49ers got out to the 7-0 lead, and then you're at Seattle, which is always a difficult place to play, and they got behind. The momentum clearly swung in that game, and they were trailing 10-7. And that's the game that you wanted to see. Okay, you're on the road, you're trailing. All the momentum is clearly on the side of Pete Carroll and the Seahawks. And Brock Purdy, I thought, took a huge step, as did the 49ers, and won a game in an ugly, ugly sort of environment. It doesn't get any worse. Maybe Kansas City, I don't know, Green Bay, and Seattle's right up there. When you give them a lead, their crowd works into it, and they can play. They can make a difference in the outcome of the contest. And I think Brock Purdy and the 49ers, it's the closest you're going to see to their team coming from behind on the road. That to me, that was sort of a building block for Brock Purdy and company. But you're right, he's got to do a lot more of that. And until Shanahan as well as Purdy, that's how you get your wings, right? As a quarterback, you can throw it all over the field for 3 quarters, but until you do it when we need you to and march us down the field, stick it in the end zone, and let's go home, especially on the road, then you sort of arrived as an NFL quarterback.
And then there's a lot of people that believe that, until Brock shows that, he's not the guy. Now, I'm not in that category. I believe he is the guy. But and he did this in Cleveland, and Moody missed the 41-yarder.
True.
I think if there was one play that Shanahan would love to have back this year, it was the play before the field goal in that Browns game where they could have called another play. They easily could have called another play. They could have gotten 10 more yards. They could have made it easier. They just felt like, you know what, 41 yards. That he's got this. But it's a rookie kicker. On a cold, rainy day in Cleveland, with some pressure for the first time, and he pushed it. I think that was the one he pushed wide right. So, credit Cleveland. They were good that day. They played great defense. Niners also had injuries that day. I believe that was the game that Trent Williams went down. Debo went down in the first series of the game. So they had some injuries. But I mean, even in that situation, if you're saying that Brock can't come back in the fourth quarter, you're saying that he doesn't have the nerve to do it. Well, in that game, he showed exactly that nerve. He got the ball back inside the 2-minute warning. needing, or right around the 2-minute warning, needing to drive his team the length of the field for the game-winning field goal. And he connected with Ayuk like 2 or 3 times, and they moved right down the field. And they probably should have called one more play. Instead, they didn't. They kicked the 41-yarder, and they missed it. If Moody makes that 41-yarder, now Brock has come from behind, and the Niners win 20-19. By the way, how good were the Browns last night? The Browns might be – I was looking at the odds in Vegas for the Super Bowl. You can get the Browns at a great price right now, and they look terrific. I mean, the Browns right now are real, and they're no joke. I mean, they put up 37 on a very good Jets defense. Flacco throws for 300 yards again. I think he's thrown for 300 yards like 5 times in the last 5 or 6 weeks. They can run the ball. They've got weapons as far as Elijah Moore, David Njoku, Kareem Hunt. They've got some receivers, obviously Amari Cooper when he gets healthy. And then on defense, you got Myles Garrett and you got Denzel Ward and, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, the Notre Dame linebacker. So, I mean, they got a lot of talent on all 3 levels of their D. Stefanski maybe coach of the year. Flacco may be comeback player of the year award winner. So, man, watch out for Cleveland.